Gears Tactics does a great job of teaching you most of what you need to know about its tactical turn-based combat system, but many of its most helpful tips are either hidden behind random loading screen menus, or they're just meant for you to discover for yourself by happy accident, or perhaps by an unhappy accident. Regardless, here are 17 things that Gears Tactics doesn't tell you. Much like XCOM, Overwatch is one of the most vital skills in all of Gears Tactics, but a lot of the most important nuances relating to the technique are left unexplained in the game's tutorial. So let's quickly go over some of the finer details of Overwatch. First off, note that there's a visual difference in the Overwatch cone when there's a clean shot versus when the shot is obscured by a piece of cover. Sometimes a shot might seem pretty good from an overhead view, but if you look closer, you'll see that there's actually a bunch of stuff in between you and your target. This is why it's important to rely on the visuals of the cone as opposed to your own judgment when it comes to weighing the odds that an Overwatch shot will land. You can trigger your own Overwatches on your turn with skills that cause enemies to move out of cover, like, for example, Intimidating. This is an extremely useful combo that gets enemies out of cover, puts a debuff on them, and gets you a clear shot with Overwatch. You can also knock enemies out of cover and trigger Overwatches with grenades or other explosions. Allies fire their Overwatch shots simultaneously whenever an enemy enters their cone. This is important because it can be wasteful to overlap your Overwatch cones in preparation for a horde of weak enemies like wretches. It usually only takes one shot from a primary weapon to take down a wretch, though maybe more on harder difficulties. And if one wretch triggers 3 Overwatch cones, that's 2 wasted shots. Losing all of your health in Gears Tactics is obviously something you want to avoid, but it isn't the end of the world, and sometimes it can be worth the risk if it means making a big offensive play. That said, please note that in experience difficulty and higher, enemies are much more likely to execute, so keep that in mind. When a character loses their health, they enter a downed state. If they lose all of their health while in the downed state, they're dead for good. However, a downed character can be revived by an ally or a stim grenade and gain all of their action points back, along with their health, minus a penalty to their max health that compounds every time they go down. On intermediate difficulty modes and lower, a character can self-revive once per battle, except they will always only have one action on the turn they revive. The chainsaw and chainsaw bayonets are obviously extremely powerful tools that can kill an enemy in one action with 100% accuracy. However, they don't work on many enemy types. Anything that will attack you automatically when you get close are immune to chainsaws. This means wretches, grenadiers, and zealots will interrupt you as soon as you get close to them. Though, a quick note about grenadiers, if you shoot them and they enter berserk mode, they actually lose their opportunity action, making them chainsaw. Boomers are also immune, though they won't punish you for trying. Cantuses, Theron Guards, and Disciples are fair game, though note that you'll always get poisoned and suffer a massive damage reduction debuff when you chainsaw a Disciple. There are 3 ways enemies will reveal themselves on the battlefield. You'll either spot them as you reveal the Fog of War, they will be dropped in via a Locust dropship, or they'll emerge from an emergence hole. One thing that's never explicitly explained is that if you encounter enemies on the field after revealing the Fog of War, they will immediately be ready to attack you, which is why it's important to take things one action point at a time, rather than using all of your action points to rush into the unknown. Similarly, enemies that emerge from emergence holes will also attack on the turn that they come onto the field, so make sure to have the holes overwatched or be far enough away from them so that you don't get overwhelmed by multiple enemies all emerging at once. However, since the dropships are completely unannounced and there's really nothing you can do to prepare against them, you don't have to worry about enemies being dropped onto the field out of nowhere and attacking you immediately once they land. Much like in the mainline Gears of War games, you can kind of get sucked into cover. In Gears Tactics, the way this manifests is by giving you a little extra bit of movement if you end your move in cover. So if you're trying to move a large distance, make sure to move from cover to cover, much like you would in a regular Gears of War game anyway. One interesting thing to note is that enemies very rarely ever revive their downed allies. Over the course of my playthrough on the normal difficulty, this happened maybe twice, so they definitely can revive each other, but it's so rare that I would say you generally don't have to rush to kill or execute downed enemies. So don't waste actions on finishing off downed enemies, and take your time when it comes to planning out the best way to secure an execution, and how to best take advantage of the free action points it gives the rest of your squad.
I'd have messed with it.
That being said, Cantuses have a very unique ability that allows them to revive all nearby downed allies, so when there's a Cantus in play, you'll need to adjust this strategy accordingly. You'll always be able to recruit new gears into your squad at a level that's appropriate to the most recent mission, so there's never really a reason to grind a low-level gear to match your hero characters. Always recruit whenever you have the chance to add higher-level characters onto your squad. In addition, new recruits come with their own gear, and some of that gear is often rare. So if you're lacking a piece of gear for one of your star hero characters, consider recruiting new allies and taking a look at what they've got. And finally, let's just go through some rapid-fire tips that don't require much explanation, but are noteworthy nonetheless. Picking up a boom shot or torque bow requires an action point, but dropping one doesn't. There's friendly fire. This is especially notable for shotguns, grenades, and power weapons like torque bows and boom shots. You can knock enemies into emergence holes to kill them instantly. You yourself can be knocked into emergence holes and killed instantly. Throwing grenades and planting grenades are on 2 different cooldown timers. You can chainsaw bayonet through hammer burst drones Overwatches, so unlike in the mainline Gears games, you don't get stunned as soon as you get hit while charging. Don't do this against Disciples or other stronger enemies though. You can move and kick tickers all in just one action by clicking on them to end your movement.
No!
Tickers have exceptionally high evasion, so be careful about relying on Overwatch to stop them in their tracks. If you get interrupted before throwing a grenade, it still counts as throwing the grenade and you have to wait for the cooldown, so don't use grenades while under Overwatch. Before moving into cover, you'll see thin white lines extending to any enemy that is viewable from that position, and a segmented line for obscured enemies, so look closely before moving. And that's all I've got! Thanks for watching, and for more Gears Tactics, make sure to check out our review, along with the first minutes of the game. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.